All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Media Training 101, How to Effectively Engage with Media. My name is Jana Farley, and I'm the Communications Director for the ACLU of South Dakota, North Dakota, and Wyoming. No 2 days are the same in my job, but I do spend a lot of time engaging with the media and telling the stories about the work that the ACLU is doing in terms of policy and policy positions. Prior to the ACLU, I spent 12 years as a journalist. My resume, of course, isn't important, but I did want to mention that just so you know, I fully understand what reporters want out of an interview and that I won't be wasting your time tonight. So before we get started, a few quick housekeeping issues. Your lines are all muted, so if you've got a kid who's yelling or there's a dog barking in the background, no worries, you can shush them and nobody else will hear you. Also, we'll save questions till the end, but anytime you have a question, just type it in the Q&A box, which would be either at the bottom or the top of your screen. So anyhow, again, I'm so glad you've all joined me tonight, and so without further ado, let's get started. Here's Walter Cronkite, big favorite of mine. So let's begin with a quote. Journalism is what we need to make a democracy work. And you can't argue with Walter Cronkite. Journalism is what we need to make democracy work. And my cold, black journalistic heart loves this sentiment. Obviously, in today's world, the media matters now more than ever. It informs, educates, and empowers us. It plays an important role in everyone's lives. It helps shape public perception and opinion. It helps hold people and governments accountable. So how, even though, the idea of how many of you have picked up an actual copy of the paper these days, I don't know, I read a lot of my news online. So, the media landscape has changed, but again, the words and the thoughts behind them matter, especially when it comes to getting out your message. So now we've got this guy, Jim Morrison. Like Jim Morrison from The Doors once said, whoever controls the media controls the mind. He is right. And I'm not just saying that because in this photo, his eyes look like they're piercing directly into our souls. But people generally trust what they see and read in the media. And so that's where our communications efforts with the media come into play. Media coverage is important. It builds trust. According to a Nielsen study, they found that earned media, that's the media that you don't have to purchase. It's not an ad. It's free publicity gained through news coverage. This earned media is the most trusted source of information and the channel that most likely to stimulate someone to take action. So if you see something in a media source that you trust, you're going to believe it. Media coverage helps you gain credibility. So appearing in real news interviews as an expert builds your credibility among our audiences. Media coverage also establishes establish your authority. One interview is great, but it's with consistent media appearances that you build awareness in your community. You become top of mind and the first person a reporter wants to contact about a particular issue. And media coverage influences people. What you say in the media can influence a wide array of audiences. You can reach people who might not otherwise be connected with. I mean, we can all use social media and Facebook, but your message on social media is only going to those people that you are friends with. And so also, not to mention that someone might first learn about a specific initiative or an event because they see it in the media. So that's why it's important to leverage the power of the media to tell our stories and to tell the stories that you want to tell. Of course, that begs the question, how do we get the media's interest? Well, at the ACLU, we do a lot of things. We'll do, press releases and media alerts. We'll send, story ideas and pitches to particular reporters. We have personal meetings. We'll respond to inquiries. Obviously, if a reporter calls us, we're going to pick up the phone and be like, yeah, all right, we'll talk to you. And then our social media posts. So anything you do and you put out there can get the media's attention and interest. Sometimes some things are more successful than others. Sometimes things that, that we think is a good story is just, not going to get any interest. It just depends. But let's just say we've got the media's interest. The interview is scheduled. Now what? Well, it's okay to be nervous. Here's what Taylor Swift says. If someone who gets paid to be on the stage and perform, gets nervous about everything, it's perfectly natural for you to be nervous too. So don't worry about it. Everybody gets nervous. But it's important to remember that reporters are people too. And most of them are really good people. They have a job to do, and they're under a lot of pressure to meet those deadlines, to find leads, and to stay up to date with a lot of different issues. So be nice to them. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's great advice, but they're still going to ask me questions. Yes, they are. So that's where I would like you to take a little time to prepare yourself. Just, all right, the interview's scheduled. All right, sit back, take a second to breathe, and that's okay. Just breathe. Reframe the situation as an opportunity to talk to people about your story that you wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to talk to without a media interview. Just remember how your talking to the media contributes to the big picture. It really helps people understand an issue. And then prepare your messages. Don't expect, though, to receive a list of questions from the reporter ahead of the interview. That's probably not going to happen. You shouldn't expect to approve a reporter's story ahead of time. Although you can offer to fact check quotes. Like you can say, can you just read that quote back to me to see if that's exactly what I said? That's okay. But don't expect also to tell the reporter what they should write about. You don't want to do that. But what you can do is anticipate interview questions. Most interviews are going to follow a similar structure. The reporter will identify a problem or an opportunity, and he or she will want to be able to articulate the solution or benefit to that problem or opportunity. So what's going on? What's the problem? Why is it important? Why should we be listening to your story? So since we can anticipate a reporter's questions, we can prepare a lot of answers ahead of time by thinking about the key messages that you want to present. And this is where I would say messaging matters. Taking the time to really think about the points that you want to get across is important. So messaging is an important part of an interview. In a newspaper interview, you're going to have a longer time to talk to the reporter, and the reporter will likely use more quotes. But a TV or radio reporter, on the other hand, is looking for quick sound bites. You're going to have a 15-second soundbite clip that's going to be shown on the news. And you're generally not going to have more than a few minutes for that interview. So that's why it's so important to have some of these key messages thought out ahead of time. The main points, like I said, you want your audience to remember. The main points you've got to get across regardless of what kind of questions you're asked. So you should always have 3 or 4 points identified and practiced before you go to any interview. And so by practicing these key messages in advance, you're going to feel a lot more confident. So what makes up a good key message? Well, it should be something that, uplifts the value of what you're saying, is compelling, and serves as an important soundbite. It should highlight the role of your problem and your solution, and it should demonstrate how people are affected. And these key messages should also support a specific outcome, and you should be able to urge some action. So it's really, what's the value? How can this, help people, or how does it really show how people are affected? And then is there any action that people can take? So we've got all that figured out. But before the questions start rolling with your interview, I do want to talk about the differences in some of the interview formats in, whether you're talking about in person or on the phone. So if it's a TV interview, all right, you're going to be on camera. So you should establish your look. Dark colors and solids usually work best. Stay away from whites. That kind of affects the lighting, and patterns. You don't want to have something crazy busy on screen. If you're sitting at a desk, sit up straight and then kind of lean slightly forward. If you're wearing a suit jacket, leave it unbuttoned when you're seated. And then look at the reporter. The camera will be on you, but the reporter might be sitting off to the side. Just always look at the reporter because it's a conversation. But if you're on a panel, say there's a couple different people in an interview, always look at the person talking. So don't just stare off into space. And then, of course, smile. You always want to appear friendly. Online or video is another option, particularly in big states like ours. The media might be, a couple cities away and can't get to you. So we've got, thank goodness for technology, so you could interview over, FaceTime or Skype. So they're going to be similar to a real TV interview and should be treated as such. So think of the same dress code as TV, but then also think of the background. What's going on behind you? You've all seen those, memes where it's like, oh, that person didn't notice that, something crazy is happening behind them. So just, check your background to make sure it's not too distracting. I know, like here, I'm in my dining room, so I've got a painting behind me. Then test the height of your camera and chair. You don't want to be like, cutting yourself off. Like if my camera was down this way, it's like, oh, good, I can see, I'm talking, but you can't see my face. The same with like, oh, look, this way. Oh, I'm glad I can see my forehead. So just test your angles, see what works best, and then kind of aim for that slightly downward angle. And then keep your eyes on the lens if you can, not necessarily the screen. Radio interviews can be recorded or live. For live interviews especially, prepare for an abrupt start. You're probably not going to have a lot of time to chit chat with the host. They're just going to, start right in, be like, hey, all right, we're here with so-and-so and we're going to talk about this. Hey, what do you think about whatever your interview is? So depending on the show, you're probably not going to, like I said, not get a lot of those pleasantries before diving in. If you're in studio, sit close to the microphone. It's going to feel a little awkward, but it will work. And you should have an opportunity, the sound guy or girl should have an opportunity to test the levels with you before the show starts. If you're calling in, use a landline when possible. I know that's probably not necessarily something we all have these days, but if it is possible, if you're at an office or something, use the landline instead of your cell phone. You might just have a little bit of better reception. And then, remember it's called a show for a reason. Because people can't see you and don't see the expression on your face, speak with passion. It's important to really, convey that through your voice. And then we've got, like I said, for especially phone interviews, since some newspaper interviews, of course, are going to be done in person, others are going to be done over the phone. The same could be said with, TV interviews. Sometimes they'll, do just a phone interview that they'll record. But if you're, on the phone, just remember to take the call from a quiet, comfortable place. And then, sit up or stand. Don't lie down on your couch. You will, you might feel more comfortable lying on your couch, but you're probably going to come across as maybe a little bit too comfortable just with the tone of your voice. And, phone interviews are great because you can keep your talking points and notes in front of you, and no one's going to know. So now that we've talked about the different formats of the interviews, it's actually interview time. So let's talk about how to engage the reporter. So be like Pete Rose. Always have something to say. And he says, when somebody wants to interview me, I've always got something to say. Just channel him. Your objective, of course, is to give a succinct explanation of, well, in this case, I wrote the ACLU's position, but your position for, you or your organization or whatever you are trying to convey. Giving voice to, your clients or supporters or people that you are representing. And you want to make sure that you're answering questions accurately and efficiently. Your responsibility, of course, is to inform and educate, to be an informational resource for people, to correct the record if needed, invite further interactions, stay positive, and stay on message. I think it's something all of you can handle. Another important thing to think of when you are doing the interview is make a connection with the reporter. Like I said, reporters are just people too. They're just good people doing their job. And it helps if you can, convey a little bit of a sense of connection with them. So make eye contact and smile. Check your energy levels and body language. I mean, you don't want to seem like it's such an effort to be here to talk to them. Just, be a little excited about what you're talking about if appropriate. And then listen intently and show some interest in what the reporter is saying. And by doing that, you can get an idea of what they're going to be doing with the story as well. And then, if something's funny, laugh when appropriate. It's okay. You guys are, humans. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to smile. It's okay to make this kind of connection with the reporter. Because that's, like I said, an interview is a conversation. You are two people just talking. But there are some things definitely to remember. Choose your words wisely. Keep your answers short and concise. Use non-technical terms. You don't want to, if you're dealing with a legal matter, you don't need to use the legalese. Think about it as the idea of you can break it down to that middle school level, something that everyone can understand. Another thing to remember is use complete sentences. This is particularly important when you're doing a TV interview, because they're looking for, snippets and clips that they can use on their show. So it's the idea of you would want to say something like, dinner was great. I really enjoyed the food and company, instead of, it was good. So it's just kind of, repeat back a little bit of the question that they asked to form that complete answer. And then, don't be afraid to say, I don't know the answer to that. Just because you're being interviewed doesn't mean you know everything. And you also don't want to put out inaccurate information. So if it's something that you don't know, you just say it. I don't know the answer to that. You could follow up. You could say you could follow up with them later. Let me ask my colleague, they would know. Or you could suggest another person for the reporter to talk to. And then this one is my favorite. Don't feel like you have to fill every pause. We are naturally inclined to fill the space in the conversation. Nobody likes that awkward silence. But you don't need to, and really that little bit of awkward silence is a much shorter period of time than you actually think it is. But it's actually kind of a reporter's trick. A lot of the times when I was a reporter, and especially if I was doing a phone interview and trying to, type at the same time, sometimes I would be having to catch up on typing as, someone had stopped talking before I could answer another question. And that's when someone would want to, the person I was interviewing would want to fill that pause with more information. And sometimes that's kind of those off the cuff moments are where some of the best quotes come from, or, that's where a gotcha moment could come from. So it's, the person a reporter's interviewing could, in that pause could be finally say something like, okay, it was me, I killed my sister. So just kind of avoid those kind of gotcha moments. Once you've said what you want to say, just stop, and it's fine. And then just some things to remember, just to be aware of. Beware of questions that ask you to, speculate, that begin with a negative statement, or that put words in your mouth, or that are questions that are irrelevant to your area of expertise, or questions that ask you to choose between one or more, bad options, so to speak. But that, of course, brings up to, all right, fine, I can be aware of those things, but what do I do if a reporter asks me something like that? So how do I navigate these difficult questions? Well, I have one word for you: pivot. I hope you all recognize the Friends reference. It's a classic episode, but it's the idea of pivot. It's perfecting the pivot. You don't have to answer the question if you don't feel comfortable, but also saying no comment isn't a good answer. It's in fact, it's kind of a terrible answer. It looks like you're some sort of shady politician trying to hide something. So you always want to get back to your message. So that's where the pivot comes in. You're taking the interview in the direction that you want it to go. And to do that, you have to remember the ABCs. You can acknowledge the question, then you block or bridge, and then you continue with your message. So easy. Remember the ABCs. But I know what you're thinking. How do I do that? How do I, what's some details here? Well, it's the block and the bridge. Takes the discussion from unfriendly, like maybe an unfriendly question, to friendly territory, and then making a smooth pivot to an area that fits your agenda. So for an example, you could say, I can't speak to that directly, that's the block, but the bigger issue here is, there's the bridge, and then you insert your key message. Or you could say something like, although there are many questions surrounding what went wrong, that's the block, I think what's most important is to remember, and then you insert your key message there. It does take a little bit of practice, but it's a very effective technique. And there's a lot more examples here of like blocking and bridging phrases to remember. So, what's really important, or the issue at hand is, we can all agree that, or, I don't know that, but what I know for certain is, or, the real question here is. So there's a lot of ways that you can take it from, I'm not really going to answer that question. Instead, we're going to talk about this. It just takes a little practice. And now some final thoughts. So congratulations, the interview is over. And now you want to see how the story will play out. Or maybe you don't. I don't know. I don't like, seeing myself necessarily on camera, but, you will watch it. But I do first have, before, we're completely through, I have some final thoughts for you to remember. So just always remember, do stay in interview mode until you are unmiked and out of the building. Do stop to correct yourself if you need to. Do use personal stories. That is A-okay. And in fact, reporters love that. And then do feel free to ask the reporter when they expect the story to run, or if they need more information. Again, two-way street. And then don't be afraid to pause when answering. Like I said, you can pause. It's okay. That little snippet of time is shorter than you think it is. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know. You don't feel the need to know everything. You can always let the reporter know. You can get back to them or refer them to someone else who would know the answer. And then don't feel the need to answer a question you're not comfortable with. Other important things to remember, just some kind of, reporter vocabulary here. On the record, assume that anything you say to a reporter is going to be on the record and could be used and attributed to you in the story. So when you're just talking to a reporter, that's all on the record. Off the record, though, both parties agree that the entire conversation is off limits to reporting. So this must be clearly established before the conversation happens, not after the fact. You can't have a 20-minute interview with someone and then, get cold feet and then be like, oh, no, wait, that was all off the record. No, it doesn't work that way. And then on background is where both parties agree that the context of the conversation may be published, but your name or affiliation or position may not. So it could be something like an official from the mayor's office said, or a spokesperson for something said. On background is a way just for reporters to get, to just get to understand what the story is before they really start reporting. And that is it. Do I have any questions? If you have any, let me look. I don't know if there's any in the Q&A box, but please type them in the Q&A box, and I will be happy to answer them. If there's not any questions today, too, I will also say that you can email me anytime, jfarley@aclu.org, and I'd be happy to answer questions or help with any media opportunities that you have. Let me just check to see any Q&As. I don't see any in here, but yeah, like I said, if you do have any questions in the future, just please contact me. And I'm so happy that you were, oh wait, I've got something here. Chat. Oh, what was the C in ABC? Can we get a copy of the slides? Yes, you can get a copy of the slides, so I will put that together. The C, let me go back to my notes here. The C is the continue with your message. So you acknowledge the question, you block or bridge, and then you continue with your message. All right, I don't see any other questions popping in, but like I said, please feel free to email me if you do, and I will send these slides out to everybody who hopped on our webinar tonight. So thank you so much. Have a great night. Whew.